In the Diablo II Resurrected Technical Alpha, we got to see some amazing things. While the game is incredible and feels good in a lot of ways, there are certain things that need some adjusting according to the PvP community. In this video, we're going to break down some of the top things that myself and some great PvP players in the community have noticed that just don't feel the same. I'll also do my best to suggest the appropriate changes throughout the review. It might be a few months before players get to hit that hostile button officially against each other, but I'm hoping we can help Vicarious Visions make that experience as good as possible for all players of various skill levels. That being said, let's dive in. The first hot topic of contention in the PvP community, and I think really the community in general, was limiting the casting range for certain skills. Some players who were involved in the testing of the technical alpha tried it out on an ultra-wide screen. Aside from some slight loading issues if you quickly move throughout an area, one big problem that people saw in this setup while using an ultra-wide screen was that you were able to cast spells ridiculously far out, far before monsters could even respond to you, but in a PvP sense, it would be miserable to get a blizzard cast down on top of you from 2 or 3 screens away. One silver lining about this that I noticed though was that the missile range for certain skills seems to be capped. If you look at Firebolt in this video, it seems like after a while the missile does die out. It seems to also be like that with arrows. This gives me hope that there is a potential fix to this problem. In D2 Legacy, certain skills like Blizzard or Meteor, or those offensive skills that would be cast directly down on top of your opponent, couldn't be cast if your opponent was like 1.5 screens away. That's a rough approximation. To go further, if a target moved about 2 screens away from you, they no longer showed up on your minimap and were no longer loaded. That being the case, if you had a name lock on that player or that target, that name lock would immediately break. A good way to take these various screen measurements into play would just be to limit the casting range for a character. If you try to cast an offensive skill on top of your target that is too far away, the skill just simply doesn't cast. Let's move on to another hot topic of contention in the PvP community, and this one surrounds game mechanics. Some of them just didn't feel the same. First and foremost, the skill Whirlwind seems to have some sort of delay to it. It's more noticeable when you're actually playing the character and using the skill, but a YouTuber by the name of DHA actually put together a high-level barb on Alpha and noticed this same delay even if your character has a good amount of attack speed. It likely comes from the developer's attempt to sort of smooth out the animation when starting a Whirlwind, but this slight delay makes tele-stomping for a barb significantly less effective. Even in PvM, it just feels different when you cast it. Staying true to the Diablo II Legacy approach, there should be very little delay in the time that you click the Whirlwind button to use the skill and when the actual spinning animation happens. And while we're on the subject of Whirlwind, DHA also reported another frustration with the skill. Any die-hard barb user will know that when you want to use the skill Whirlwind, or really any skill for that matter, and not directly lock on top of your target, you can either hold the Alt button to show items, or you can click and hold a non-target. And basically that means you just click the ground somewhere, hold down right click, and move your cursor. With the skill Whirlwind, this basically allows you to steer your barbarian without ever locking onto a monster or a target. This doesn't seem to be the case in Diablo II Resurrected, even if you're holding down the click button for Whirlwind, or if you're holding Alt, your cursor seemingly can still select a target and lock onto it. This will cause unwanted locks in PvP and even in PvM. If you've ever been using Whirlwind to grind through the game in MF, one good way to get that perfect triangular pattern on your target is to either hold down Alt or click that non-target and steer your barbarian or your assassin around. The fix for this seems pretty obvious, but I'm not sure how much of a pain in the ass it is from a programming standpoint. But what we would have to do is just make it so that when a player holds Alt or is clicking and holding a skill, their cursor is unable to lock on to any other targets. Another mechanic that feels weird is teleporting. More specifically, teleport chains don't seem to work the same way as they did in Classic. In Diablo II Classic or Legacy, I'm sort of using those terms interchangeably here, if you clicked teleport on top of a target multiple times, your character would sort of bounce back and forth between a 12 o'clock and a 3 o'clock position, and the skill would continually keep being cast. In Diablo II Resurrected, that doesn't seem to be the case. If you're right next to a target and you cast teleport, it doesn't seem like your character actually casts it at all. Or if they do, they stay right in the same spot. Because this isn't working as it does in Diablo II Classic, the old PvP trick for double tele blind spotting will not work. Additionally, I believe it might also affect teleport chains. I don't think that will work properly if your character does not cast teleport when the target is right next to you. DHA also did a detailed breakdown of this. So in the video description, I'm gonna link you to his channel to check out some of the testing he did with the alpha. I'll also link you to the community post that he put on Blizzard's website. Some very, very good suggestions from DHA. And the final thing I want to talk about is something that I noticed right away from day one of testing, and that is that bringing up any sort of screen seems to affect your cursor and your X position on the map. For example, CT teleporting is very common in the game, both for PvM and for PvP. In case you're not familiar, it's where you bring up the character or skill screen to sort of give yourself leverage as you're casting teleport. You basically bring that screen up, click and drag your mouse to a point beyond that screen, and your character will teleport that far. It's a very quick way to get through MF runs for areas that might require you to teleport a lot. And in PvP, it's an amazing way to break people's chain locks, name locks, and many, many other things. A lot of times when you're moving around the map with leverage like that, players use their mini-map to actually gauge their position and to see where they are in comparison to anything else. The weird thing is though, is as soon as you bring up one of these one-sided screens in Diablo II Resurrected, the X on your minimap seems to shift away from your character. Most people probably won't notice this, and if they don't duel or use CT casting, most people probably won't care. But for the large group of people who do, this will feel very different and very odd. Basically, what we would want to do is just relate the positioning of the X on the minimap and the cursor itself to the player's positioning on the screen and not the screen layout in general. So those are the actual technical things that people throughout the PvP community noticed that we're hoping get adjusted before the final release. I want to end this video with a different type of suggestion. The original programmers of Diablo II wanted to put in guild houses and dueling arenas into the game, but simply ran out of time. Here are some screenshots of some early concepts for these guild houses and dueling arenas. How crazy would it be to see these in Diablo II Resurrected? For years, there have been PvP servers that try to do this exact thing. It's never been the same though, because they didn't exist on Battle.net. Some of their mechanics were messed up and it just never felt the same. But having an end game team dueling or 1v1 dueling arena for Diablo 2 players, I think would be an amazing idea. It's a way to add some amazing new content to the game without changing it at all. Especially if you add in some sort of controls to the game or to these arenas in general. Maybe you make them guild specific, maybe you make them invite only, maybe they're all just private games or something. But I think doing that and giving the players the power to control who is in the game might be a good way to fight back against some of the initial toxicity that might exist. If a focus was put on this endgame PvP, not just for the guild houses and dueling arenas, but possibly for player control of who's in the game, that sort of change has the potential to give some real durability to this game over time. For the most part, I think this game is amazing. They really nailed a lot of stuff here, and Vicarious Visions, you guys are doing great. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. I want to thank Blizzard if you've seen this video and you take any of it into account. As always, guys, I'll catch you in the next video.